Well, hey folks, I wanted to take an opportunity to check in with you now that we are a couple of weeks into the semester. First, to say that I've enjoyed our one-on-one phone chats. Most of them didn't last very long. It wasn't my intention to keep you on the phone for very long, but I wanted to check in with you, see how things were going, see if you had any questions. For those of you who've never had me before, I wanted a few minutes where we could get to know each other a little bit, and as I said on several phone calls, give you the opportunity to see that I'm a pretty decent guy, and that I am really hoping for your success. I'm trying to find ways that I can help you to grow in who you are as a manager and to achieve your goals by fulfilling your educational prospects and potential. So thank you for taking the time to be on those phone calls with me. I know that took time out of your day when you could have been, should have been working on something else. Secondly, I wanted to give you a little bit of encouragement about the little mini assignments that we're doing. You can either interpret that as MINI assignments or MANY assignments, whichever fits most appropriately into your perspective. We've done 4 of them now, I guess. The 2 where you talked about yourself, and then the one from chapter 1, and then the second one, chapter 2, where you picked the person and wrote about him, I think in most cases there. And I wanted to tell you that we're going pretty well with those. You might still have an opportunity, a few of you haven't gotten a hold of this yet. What I want you to do is put your name and then A04 C2 Q6 or whatever the case may be, to indicate the assignment number, the chapter number, and the question number. So your name and those pieces of information on the top line, then hit enter, and then on the second line paste the text of the question that you're answering, however that takes 2 lines or 3 lines or 4 lines or whatever, and then start writing. And I really want you to study that question and be able to answer in your own mind what is the main thing that he's looking for here, and then make sure that you answer that question. And I would really like for you to get toward the bottom of page 2. Several of you have done a pretty good job of giving me some background, but you've stopped a third of the way down page 2, halfway down page 2, and there was still a little bit of room to expand a little bit on one of those ideas. And especially in the case with the person, in some cases you did a real good job of giving me his background, but I didn't think that you really talked a lot, and especially not in depth, about how that has impacted management today. What we do in management that drives from what that person did. And so I made a comment, maybe took off a few points, put a comment about how you had another half a page that you really could have got in depth on one of those ideas. So the point of that paper was really, how did that person contribute? And if you didn't answer that question, you didn't get the points in my mind that you were set up for. So as we go forward, you won't lose a point on the formatting if you'll do that one line at the top with your name and the assignment, chapter, question number, and then paste in the text of the question. And hopefully that won't take more than a few lines of your paper, and then you've got a good page and a half at least to really get into answering the question. When you can, give me an example of something that happened to you in your workplace, or a situation where you had to act some way, and you either acted in line with what this question says or acted alternately, and how if you had known this thing at that point in time, you might have acted differently. But you'll keep my attention a little bit better, and maybe we could say that you'll do a little better overall if you try to build some examples into this. It's not meant to be a dry research, write what you read about kind of thing, but how do you apply this thing to life? And it may be that it makes less sense to talk about how you could use this idea in the future, and more about how you've seen it in the past, because that's where the connections occur. So with that background, I wanted to spend the bulk of this little video talking about the Theorist paper. Hopefully you've had a chance to print the instructions, to print the list of people, and to print the rubric. And I'm just going to talk through that really quickly. Where your normal weekly papers are a page and a half to 2 pages, this is designed to be maybe 3.5 to 4. So it's maybe twice as long as a typical assignment. but it's intended to go much more in depth about one of these people that we're reading about that has influenced management. So in some regards, it's a little bit like the assignment from chapter 2, where you had the list of 20 people and you picked one to talk about that person. This is a list, as you've seen, of about the same number of people. There's a few, actually more people, because it's taken from people throughout the book rather than just in one chapter. And I want you to pick one of them. And for this assignment, you'll have to do a little bit more research. You're going to want to know more about the biography of this person, especially in terms of family influences that might have brought them to the positions that they took about management. Maybe how their parents taught them things that they used later in their management theory, or their education and the fact that he had this degree or he dropped out of that school influenced his management decisions and theories later. Anything in that person's background that you think contributed to what this person was saying about management is going to be interesting to have in this paper. So do a little bit of research. You might have to go to some academic journals, maybe some websites. Just try to make sure that it's not the Wikipedia type where it may be right, it may be wrong, nobody really checks it. Try to go for stuff that's a little bit more official, that's a little bit more vetted, where we can really believe that what we're reading is accurate. So I'm not going to tell you that you have to find 5 sources or 2 books or 3 articles. You may get through this paper because you know a lot about this person without using any references at all. My hunch is that you're going to want to find a few, and that you're going to want to build them into your paper as supporting evidence. But there are no components to the grading or the expectations that say that you have to do that at all. And certainly not that you have to do X number of them. So it's a 4-page paper. And as you look through the instructions on this paper, I'm just going to hopefully not tell you the obvious and read it to you, but what do I take away from it? What did I really want to communicate there? 4 pages, some very specific structure. A page of that is background information. If you have to spill over into page 2, you're giving me way too much background information. Now, note that for this paper, I'm still going to want you to put your name on the top line, and I'm going to want you to put the name of the person you're writing about on the top line. But there really is no question to add, so when you hit enter and go to line 2, you're starting your paper. There are no headings, there are no subheadings. You're just going to have a page, all but one line, where you give me information about this person and his or her background. And it may not take the full page. If you've got 3/4 of a page to a page, you're probably right on target. But when you get finished, and this may be several paragraphs, when you get done with the background, then you're going to hit enter, and you're going to go into the second major part of this, which is what are the philosophies and the theories that this person developed or championed that came about as a result of that background that you just gave me. Again, you don't have to tell me this, you don't have to put in a heading, but it will be helpful if you'll do some sort of transition to know that you're moving out of the background reference information and into the theory and philosophy segment, especially if you took less than a page for part 1. If you get to the bottom of part 1, page 1, and you flip to page 2 and you're starting the second thing, there's a fairly clean break when you turn the page. But if you only take 3/4 of a page to talk about the background, and then you get into the philosophies at the bottom part of page 1, put some sort of a transition. These kinds of experiences help to shape his philosophies. That's a great transition, because now I know you're talking about philosophies. Spend about 2 pages talking about his or her philosophies and theories. And it may be that you name them or mention them, and then spend several sentences to a paragraph talking about what that theory meant or how it applies to the workplace and to management. But 2 pages where you talk about the contribution or contributions that this person made. And then the 4th page of this, it really is practical application. So again, if you're going to section 3 at the top of page 4, there's a pretty clear divider as you turn the page. But if you're not at the bottom of page 3 when you finish part 2 there, you're going to want to put in some sort of a transition, especially in that case where you say, so what does this all mean? What do I take out of this, or how can I apply this to real life? Something that transitions my brain into understanding that you're now talking about the final part of this. And the last part, do we still use these philosophies and theories today? Have you used them? How could you use them? Where have you seen them? How have you seen circumstances where they could have been used but they weren't? And what might have been different if they had been? Those kinds of things. Certainly not all of that. Use your personality in this to kind of dictate how this paper flows. But basically, a fourth of it is what brought this person here. Half of it is what did this person say, and then a fourth of it is why does it matter, or how do we still use it, or something to that effect. If you have gone out and you've gotten outside research, websites, books, articles, things like that, keep that list, and then add a page 5 where it just has your references. Remember that we want to use standard APA format, so there is a structure to those things. If you don't know what that structure looks like for an APA format paper, get in touch with the Georgia Southwestern University Writing Center. I think that I put something in the syllabus on how to contact them. You can also go through the GSW website. I think it's under academics, and then you look for the Writing Center. But they will do online consultations where you make an appointment with them and you send them a draft of something and they look over it. And then you text box back and forth. You don't actually see them on the screen or anything. But you can instant message them back and forth and ask questions and get input and whatnot. And excuse me, dry throat. They'll give you some pointers on how to structure this thing. Won't actually change it if it's wrong, but they'll kind of talk to you about what it should be. You want to make sure that they're listed alphabetically, either by last name of the primary author or by the first word of the title, if there is no author. In the body of the paper, you're going to want to use APA formats. So you'll say Grimes, 2016, or you'll say Bennett and Shokus, 2014, or whatever. But that 5th page, if you use resources, put them on that page. Not part of page 4, but as a separate page 5. And again, if you don't need to use any outside resources, if you can get everything you need from our textbook, then you might just mention in the book that, or in your paper, that our book gives lots of information about this individual. And then I'll just know that that's your source. But if you don't use outside sources, you don't need page 5. It's not something that you have to put. No title pages, no headings in the middle of the paper, just that basic structure. What brought them here? What did they contribute? How do we use it? Grading. In fact, before I do that, there is an attachment to the Dropbox at the bottom. Hopefully you've already seen that. A list of the theorists that you could write about. Pick any one of them off of that list of 27. And that's the focus of your paper. And hopefully we don't have everybody choosing the same theorist, although we're not going to have any kind of a process that you approve it. If you like the name on the list, write about them. And hopefully I won't read 20 versions of the same paper or several versions of the same 4 papers, that you'll have some variety just by natural selection. But I get what I get. If everybody is drawn to the same one, then I'll read the same paper about every one of them. All right, so there's that list there. And then finally, the grading, there is a rubric also attached to the Dropbox assignment box where I talk to you about what a good paper looks like. And you can pull that up and print it off if you haven't already done so. Up to 10 points is that first section where you talk about the background of this person, what contributed to that person's philosophies and theories. 10 points out of 10 if you did a good job of introducing the paper, talking enough about the person's education and experiences in life and family and all those factors that influence the decision. If it takes up the better part of a page, like I've asked you for, and if it's written pretty well and flows pretty well. Only 8 out of 10 if you didn't do all of those things. So if it's short, but you've done everything else, or if you've got it the right length, but you didn't talk an awful lot about, somehow or another you got the page, but you didn't talk much about the influences. 3 of those 4 things is 8 points. All 4 is 10 points. 6 points if you did 2 of those things, and 4 points if you really didn't do a very good job on any of it. So at least 4 points for turning in the paper. The management theories, which is pages 2 and 3, up to 35 points. That's a third of your overall grade. Again, there's 4 things we're looking for. You've talked about several contributions or theories or philosophies that this person had. You've talked about really kind of why they're important, or at least why they were important at the time, and how they contributed to the overall progression of thought. If you've filled up the bulk of pages 2 and 3, and if it's written pretty well with a good flow of ideas, all 4 of those things, 35 points. 32 points if you've done 3 of those 4 things. Where I might have an opportunity to deduct a few points here and there really happens to fall more in the flow of ideas and how well it's written, because it won't be that hard to get a lot of background on them. It may be challenging to find several contributions because some of these folks were really known for one thing, but do a little digging and try to find out how different people have used it, so forth. 28 out of 35, that's reasonably a C. That's about 80% of the points, so that's a B. Level 4 on this grid is perfect. Level 3 is an A, lower A. Level 2 is a lower, mid, maybe B. And then level 1 is a low, mid-level C. So hopefully there's no way really that you can get lower than a C on this thing if you turn something in. 24 out of 35 if you're missing a lot of that content. Major section 3 is the perspectives, which is page 4 of your paper. 25 points if you discuss what about today? How does it work? How does it apply? How is there value in it? How have you seen it? Those kinds of things. Do we still use these ideas? Where we might see them? If these things really work better in manufacturing or banking or education or government or things like that, and you talk a little bit about where you might see these things if they're not commonplace everywhere. And then did you use the better part of page 4? And does it flow pretty well? Is it written pretty well? So again, you may lose some points if you don't really talk about rounding it all out, putting it all together. How do we use it today? Why is it kind of phased out if we don't use it today? If it doesn't flow very well, or if it's rough and it doesn't look like it was written very well, you might lose some points. And then the references. If you cited them in the paper appropriately, Grimes, 2016, whatever, if the format of the page 5, is correct, if everything that you put on the back page is in the body of the paper, and vice versa, everything in the body of the paper is on the back page, then you'll get 10 out of 10. What happens if you don't have any references? Well, you kind of default to all 10 because there's nothing to grade. But I hope that you will get a couple of ideas outside of the textbook. 8 out of 10 if you did 3 of those 4 things, 6 out of 10, 2 of the 4 things, so forth. And then structure. Did you follow all the directions? Basically, I'm looking for that one line at the very top where you put your name and the name of the person you're researching, and that it basically falls to one page, second and third page, fourth page, separate reference page. Structure's the correct on the reference page. Calibri, 11 point, just like your regular assignments. Double space, just like your regular assignments. If you've gotten into a groove with the regular assignments, you'll get all the points possible on the structure, which is 5. Did it all, 5 points. Generally did it, 3 points. Nothing beyond that. Typo there, 0 out of 10. Did not follow, it's 0 out of 5. And then we're going to have a plagiarism turnitin.com function to this. If you take ideas outside of your own, if you take them from a reference, from a website, from a book, from an article, whatever, you've got to put it in your own words, and not just a few words here and there. You take a paragraph and put it into a sentence or two, your interpretation of what that means. And then when we plug this thing into the assignment Dropbox, it's going to push it through Turnitin.com behind the scenes, and it's going to bring you back a number. The lower the number, the better. It's called an originality report, but really it's a duplication report. And the higher the number, not the more original, but the less original. So you really want to get a 0 to 5. If you put reference information, APA style reference information, there's going to be overlap because everybody cites the same way. So if you submit a paper that has page 5 in the references, and you get back and you're able to look at this thing and it's on a 7, don't immediately panic, because a lot of that 7 might be page 5. And I'm going to look at that when I'm grading this thing. I'm going to immediately look to see if it's 5 or less. And you'll get the full 10 points on plagiarism if it's 5 or less. If it is 6 to 8, I'm going to have to go look at page 5 and see how much you've got on page 5. And if there's a lot of references, I'm going to say, well, several points out of this 6 to 8 is related to page 5. So I'm going to factor that down a little bit. And you may still get the full 10 points if your number is 7, if you've got several references. So don't let that mess you up. So 10 points, 5 or less on the originality score, 8 points if it's 6, 7, or 8, 6 points if it's 9 to 12, and if it's higher than 12, especially after we have factored out page 5, I'm so sorry about my dry throat here. If it's higher than 12, then you have taken way too much of this paper from other resources, and that's alarming because page 4 is almost entirely your thoughts. Pages 2 and 3 is mostly your interpretation of their theories. You could have a lot of overlap potentially on page 1, but you shouldn't. I mean, most of that is coming from other sources somehow in terms of their background and their biography. And then grammar and spelling, 5 points. I'm going to look for little grammar things and little spelling things and make a notch on the side. If you've got more than 4 of those, it's going to be a loss of points. So I'll give you up to 4 with no loss of points, 5 points. If it's 5, 6, or 7 grammar problems or spelling problems combined, you'll get 4 points. And if it's 8, 9, 10, or 11, you'll have 3 points out of 5. And if you have 12 or more, it's only 2 points out of 5. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how I'm going to grade this thing. What I'm looking for, it's really more about the flow than it is about the nitpickies, although the structure and the grammar and spelling does have an impact on it. A full 10% of it potentially is anti-plagiarism. So if you can manage to write a good paper, even if it's only 4 pages, where you don't plagiarize, then you're going to be better off. That's real life. But most of it, as you see, is the theories and your perspective on those theories. That's 60 points out of 100. So if you do those 2 sections well, you're borderline C before we consider anything else. If you do those things well and you don't plagiarize, you're sitting on about a 70. And if you wrote a pretty good opening, you've got a B on this paper without even trying really hard. If you have questions, let me know. Send me an email, try to get with me on the video, Ultra Collaborate, or whatever the case may be. Hopefully this gave you a pretty good overview as to what I'm looking for. There are very few questions. It's always safer if you have a question to ask than to think or to hope and then be wrong. So let me know if there's anything that doesn't make sense, but hopefully this gets you started. It's due toward the end of February, I believe. I don't have my calendar here with me right away, but you've got about 4 weeks or so to work on it. And then after we come back from spring break, I'll tell you about the final project. So don't worry about that for another month or so, month and a half maybe. Okay? All right. Hope things are going well. Again, thank you for your time on the phone calls. Great to get to know you. I'm enjoying reading your papers, so keep it up.